Dober večer in lepo pozdravljeni, tako gledalci na spletu kot v dvorani. Danes imamo eno izjemno priložnost, da se pogovarjamo z režiserko filma Gospodična Marx, Susanno Nicchiarelli. Med pogovorom lahko zastavljate tudi vprašanja za režiserko v Q&A okence. Vprašanja bomo sproti spremljali, jaz jih bom potem zastavila režiserki tudi sproti. Pogovor bo potekal v angleščini in zato bom zdaj tudi kar preklopila na angleški jezik. So hello, Susanna. I just said hi to the audience online and in the cinema, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I would just like to start with quite an obvious question. Your previous film, Nico, 1988, was an autobiographical film, and you continue to do autobiographical films in a way. So my first question would be, what is the thing that attracts you to portray real autobiographical stories of women as you do?
You mean biographical?
Yes, biographical.
Autobiographical
Pardon, yes.
would be about me.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, I just like the idea of working on real people, because real people are very difficult to put into normal story structure, because what they do, and they're always so different from how we usually imagine fictitious characters, and they're always so surprising. And I like to deal with reality more. And what I also like about working on biographies is that you can overturn the cliches. You can work, you know, like with Nico, I worked on the cliches of the biopic of the rock star, and I overturned them. And here I worked on the cliche of the biopic of the political leader, and I overturned them. But of course, the first instinct is that the stories of these women interest me, and then I decided to make a movie about them.
So what was the point for you to decide to make a movie about Eleanor Marx? And also, what were your thoughts when you realized that this is in a way going to be a costume film as well, because it's, you know, set in the past, and you have to kind of set your film in the past as well?
Well, I have always done films set in the past. All of my films are set in the past. I never did a film set in today, in the present day. And because I like very much that way of playing with the characters, the costume, the scenes, and of giving the possibility to the audience to take a time machine and go in another time. I like that very much. And I like the idea of telling stories about the past, because it gives you a different perspective on things. It develops your way of looking at the past in a critical way. I never celebrate the past. I like to talk about it in a critical way. And as I was saying before, even overturning the cliches or the things we think are obvious about our past, which never are. What attracted me in Eleanor Marx was, well, I studied philosophy, and I'm very passionate about history of thought, history of ideas. And what attracted me was that this woman was a great revolutionary, that she was the daughter of Karl Marx, that she had participated so much to the thought of her father, and that her life was so imperfect, that her life was so difficult compared to her ideas, that somehow I still believe it's a story of a great revolutionary woman, and I still believe it's not a story of a woman that was defeated in any way. I think her ideas and her battles are very important battles that would always be. She was always on the right side. But then I think it's very interesting to see how difficult and complicated life is, and how difficult it is to put your ideas into practice. And her life, her love life, so in contradiction with her ideas, was for me extremely interesting, an extremely interesting story to tell.
So what was the research that you did before, planning the whole thing? You probably read letters, books. What all did you do?
Yes, I read, well, with Nico, it was different. With Nico, I traveled around Europe and I met the people that had met her. But of course, this time I didn't have anybody who knew her that was alive. I did meet the Marx family, the descendants of the Marx family in Paris. And I spoke with them a lot about certain things. They're the descendants of Johnny Longuette, who is the little boy that you see in the film. But what all I had to do was to read her letters and read her writings. And it's incredible how much in the 19th century people wrote letters and how incredibly interesting they are. And they were not at all far away. I mean, those letters made me feel that they were all alive around me. It was like talking to them. I mean, reading the letters between sisters, the letters between Marx and Engels, that family came to life for me with their pains, their sorrows, their jokes, their irony. And there is so much material, of course, so many letters, because of course there is an Eleanor Marx archive. And I also found her notebook of when she was a little girl studying history. She studied with her father because she didn't go to school. There weren't actually, girls weren't able to go to school to learn history and politics. So she learned everything from her father. And her notebook had a drawing of a nice princess inside with a beautiful hair and a beautiful dress in the film. And that touching, she came alive. And contradict page, there were writings about history and revolution, and on the other page there was a beautiful woman with a nice dress, and it was maybe the way she imagined herself, I don't know. But anyway, she was interesting, and all the material gave me all these interesting nuances that I put in the film.
And at what point, when you were doing all this research and reading, did you decide on the focus of your film, which is her adult life, and also the focus of not only her political thoughts and her political work, but also, just showing her relationship and her vulnerable side and the side that, we might not have imagined?
Yes, that's a nice question, because it's always like that when you do a biopic, is that at the beginning you want to do everything. And then you choose. And then you choose. And of course, at the beginning, I wanted to do the entire life of Eleanor Marx and her sisters, because everything was interesting. But then I realized that her love story, her last love story, and the way her life ended was the most significant part. Not significant necessarily on the point of view of ideas and politics, or maybe yes, even on that point of view, because it's somehow it was about the way she lived her ideas in her practical and private life, and of course the fact that she chose to go away that way, that she chose to take her own life. It's such a significant thing for a character like her. It doesn't at all take away strength from her message, which is go ahead. And that's why I close the film with the little girl saying, go ahead. But she wasn't somehow, she was, I think who she really is comes out in the dance. She was somehow looking for her own identity somehow, even if she was very aware of her status as a woman, and she was still fighting to form her identity, and we all are, always. And it's never easy to know who we really are.
And what were your concerns, if you had any, when you decided to, you know, portray this, let's say, in a way, toxic relationship, and her relationship towards her father, towards her partner, with the man that, you know, influenced her life immensely? Did you have, as you mentioned, that you said that you don't think the story, her story is lessened by these relationships, but did you have any concerns of how to portray this so it doesn't overshadow herself as a person and as a political figure?
Well, I think the most important thing for me was her awareness. I mean, the fact that if she, you know, if she put, and she represented in scenes, that scene from the doll's house that you see in the film, and she acted in it with Edward, she must have been aware of all the contradictions of her own story, because the doll's house seems like her own story in a crazy way. So I'm sure she believed in the liberating power of art, and she translated theater, Ibsen's theater. She translated Madame Bovary, who killed herself just like she killed herself with poison. So she must have been aware that she was both things, that she was a woman who was fighting for other women, but she was also a woman who was living she was also a victim. I mean, she was both things at the same time. And knowing and being aware of this makes her not a victim anymore, you know, makes her, but that didn't mean that she didn't suffer.
Yes, the scene that you just mentioned is it's a great twist in the film, because at first, of course, we all believe that this is a real scene between her and her partner, but then we realize it's an amazing scene. I really enjoyed it. It very much
Thank you.
picked my brain with this twist. I was also wondering, the acting in the film seems very natural, almost I would say modern, in the sense of not as stiff as we are used to seeing in other costume dramas. And I was wondering what your work with the main actress was. How did she prepare? How did you talk about how to act in this sense of Eleanor giving us, you know, this sense of modernity that we not only see, you know, from what she lived and from her words, but also in just her, you know, posture, and how, you know, also with this modern, of course, music that appears. But what were your main, you know, guidances for the actress?
Eleanor Marx was actually a very modern woman, because if you think about it, she wasn't married to her man. She didn't have children. She was supporting her man, and she wasn't supported economically by her man, but the opposite. So she was very close to us. In her letters, the language she uses, the things she says are very modern. I quoted most of the lines that come out of her mouth from her letters or her writings. So it was, of course, a very easy material to bring to the present day. And of course, my concern was that everything be natural, like it was. I mean, I remember when we looked with the costume designer at the beginning, we were looking at the pictures of Eleanor Marx, and he reminded me that in those times you had to prepare for a picture, and it was like a big event. You had 3 or 4 portraits done of you in your life, and you had to stand still for a long time, and you made your hair, and you made your... So the point was trying to look for an image that was completely different and more natural, and we found it in paintings, you know, the loose hair and the women in the house, the way they walked around, and from there, sister is very talented. So
I'm sorry,
of course, in her mouth seems natural, and
sorry,
she seems like she has always been wearing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were just frozen for a second there, so if you can repeat the
I just wanted to say that Yes, Ramola is very talented, and her way of acting is very natural, and somehow it's as if she has always been wearing those dresses. But also when we were trying the costumes on, and she decided not to wear a bust because we decided, because women of the time were against, I mean, Eleanor and other feminists were against wearing busts, and we worked on every detail of this character, on the hair, for example. I made her do her hair by herself, usually in period movies you have very complicated hairdos, but I wanted to give the feeling that this was a woman that made her hair by herself, and we worked on all these details, and in the acting, well, I owe it mostly to her, because she was very good and very natural, and what we tried to avoid in every way was a dramatic confrontation with Edward, because my feeling, also reading the letters, is that she never really confronted him. For example, in the letters, when he comes back the last time before she kills herself, she says he came back, he didn't say a word about where he had been, and why he had spent all the money. And when I was reading that letter, I thought, she didn't ask him. He didn't say a word, but she didn't ask him. So there were a lot of things that came unsaid in that couple. Many couples are like that. And I wanted it to be like this. And even in the writing, even if my temptation was to have them fight once, to have her react, I knew that the core of the story was in this non-reaction from her.
And what were your, how did you balance in the film deciding of how much to portray her political work? You also have some, you have her addressing the viewers at one point, breaking the fourth wall and talking to us directly, or quoting some lines. And how did you try to balance this? Did you have a lot of thoughts about, how much of this is going to be personal and how much of her political thought is going to be expressed in the film?
Well, the lucky thing is that her speeches and her writings are beautifully written. She was very direct. She was a very good communicator, more than her father. I mean, her father, of course, the manifesto is a beautiful, I mean, very easy to read, but the capital is very difficult. And she was very clear. She had a very clear way of explaining things, and that was a good thing, because I was able to put her speeches in the film. And I wanted her to address the audience, because I wanted her words to speak to all of us, and not only to, can you hear me?
Yes. I
wanted her words to speak to all of us. I don't wanted it to be something in the past. I wanted, and I realized later that she looks into the camera every time she's saying things that are still valuable today somehow, that whole speech about class struggle, and the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer. That's about today for me. And I wanted her to break the fourth wall, because I wanted the film to be always on a level, so that the audience was always called to think over critically and about everything that we showed them. Even the doll's house scene is a trick to the audience, in order to make the people think over the things they see and their meaning. I didn't care about the audience identifying in Eleanor and suffering with her. I didn't want that. I wanted the audience to think about her life in all its contradictions, keeping a distance. And of course, when the actor looks into camera, yes, he's looking directly at the audience, but he's also creating a distance, because he's breaking the fourth wall. So somehow breaking the game of fiction, and I wanted that very much.
And when did you come to the decision to include some modern music, in the sense of some punk rock songs, into the film? What was this? What was the idea behind this?
Well, I always decide the music when I'm writing the script. That's part of my writing process, because I believe that the music is, for me, is part of the film. It's not something that accompanies the film, but it's always something that it's a character in the film, you know. And when I was writing the script, I found the Downtown Boys, and I think they are very much what Eleanor maybe would have been if she had lived today. They are a very young punk rock, beautiful American band, communist, and I think the voice of Victoria Ruiz, that's so strong, somehow becomes towards the end the voice of Eleanor, and I like that very much. I wanted that kind of energy, which is also destructive somehow, the energy you have in punk. Punk is always yes, revolution, but also destruction, and I think that's interesting because Eleanor had that dark side in her. Also, the rest of the music is a readaptation of 4 classical pieces done by the band with which I usually work, that has always done the music in my films, that had made them film the music for Nico, and they did these readaptations, which I like very much, which are electronic modern readaptations of Chopin and Liszt. And that too was, I wanted it to be an ironic way of using the music, the classical romantic music, because the film is also a love story, but with a distance.
So at this point, I would just like to appeal to the audience one more time to ask questions. We have this Q&A section here. Oh, so we have a first question from Aliki, and I will read it to you. Thank you very much for the great film. How did you choose the lead actress? Did you have Ramola Gara immediately in mind, or did you choose from an audition?
Now, no, I didn't have her immediately in mind. I thought a lot about who could be the right Eleanor. I didn't do auditions. I met actresses and I talked with them about the script and their impressions. And Ramola, I fell in love with her because she was, when we met, I mean, she was so intelligent and she said so many intelligent things about the script, and I liked her work. And I liked her very much. So after the first meeting, I remember I wanted to call her right away and say, but I had other meetings to do. So I had to wait some time, and I was dreaming about her and saying, she's right. I just was terrified that she would find something else and not do the film, and not, it was, yes, it was love at first sight when I met her. But it was not only the way she acts, which I knew and I liked very much, but it was also the things she said about the script. That was very important for me, because when you're working on such a complex character, the actress is somebody that accompanies you. It's a work that you do together on figuring out what our Eleanor Marx could say or do. You know, that was so important.
Okay, before we have another question, I will pose another. I'm wondering about the work, also your work with the cinematographer, because the film is also shot in a way that for me as well seems very much different than, you know, we would be used to with costume dramas. So could you talk a bit about the work of the cinematographer? And a lot of the scenes are inside, but again, you know, we have scenes of, you know, lying on the floor in the house, smoking opium. And how did you want to perceive, you know, this socialist, but also kind of a bourgeois life in a way? And what were the main decisions regarding cinematography?
Well, we took paintings as a main reference, as I was saying. What the pre-Raphaelite paintings or the Impressionist paintings for the colors, and it was all a work together with costumes, production design, and photography. It was all together, and when we decided for the photography, we decided to do a very modern image, very colored and very modern, because we wanted it to be like that. And of course, we always had in mind paintings and compositions when we were doing it. And we chose the format of 166, which is a little ancient because it's a little tighter than 185, and it's higher. We had a lot of Gothic, and we wanted to see the ceilings, and yes, well, I love to work with Christelle Fournier because she always has very original ideas on how to work on a film, and every film she does is different because she has thoughts of, you know, the camera to use and the technique and how you film it and what kinds of light you use, and every time it's different. And she had a very elaborate thought on how to give the image to Eleanor Marx. There's another question.
Yes, so an anonymous...
Sorry, the children are screaming in the house. Yes.
It's okay. An anonymous attendee is writing, Nico, Eleanor Marx, who is next? Are there any interesting men you would like to do a feature about? Who are you drawn to?
Well, I am working on another biography,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the film I'm going to shoot this autumn.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait. And it's even more back in time than Eleanor Marx. It's different, but it's very exciting to work on biographies. I think it will be the last one. I mean, the next one won't be a biography again. I don't want to do only biographies, but this time it was as if it was a trilogy, and she belonged to this group of 3 women, so different from one another, but then there is something for me in common. I still don't know what. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question from Jure, who says, were you ever tempted to do a modern Miss Marx set in modern times?
Well, every time I am fascinated by these stories, there is a moment in which I think maybe I should set these stories in today. But then I never go there because I think it's a way of speaking. I mean, setting these stories that belong to the past have a way of speaking in a powerful way to today, more than contemporary stories, because somehow contemporary stories, they get old very easily, and they become old and obsolete very easily because there are certain things that we think are eternal and that last only 6 months. I could never have the problem, for example, of the model of telephone that a person has in his hands, because then 2 years later it could be obsolete, or the television, or and there has not been enough time to elaborate. So we don't really know if the things, at the same time, there are wonderful films set in the present time, but what I like to do is to set stories that are somehow there in the past, and they can last for a longer time, I think.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Perhaps someone has another question. We'll wait.
At the same time, I think, as I was saying before, that Eleanor is very, very similar to us. I mean, she could very well be a woman of the present times.
Yes, I was thinking a lot about this because you know, she's obviously someone that modern feminists could identify with, and it's not like, you know, a toxic relationship. Yes. That is just mentioned in the chat right now as well. Cannot happen to a feminist nowadays as well. So it's very modern in this sense. So the next question is from Xenia, And she says, Miss Marx was in a toxic love relationship. Did you have any purpose with portraying this, your message?
Well, I don't have a message. I like to leave the film. I mean, I like to leave the message to the audience. I think the film closes with a lot of questions. And of course, the only message that remains is the importance of the battles of Eleanor Marx. But I was as most women, I, of course, risked to be in a toxic relationship. I had my Edward, but I left him. And I'm a little bit like Olive Schreiner when she says, I'm going away. And Eleanor is not able to go away. So I think that maybe this film could give the strength to women and men, because many men are in toxic relationships like that and are not able to leave. It may give them the strength to leave. Maybe yes, maybe no, but yes.
Well, I think the ending, despite of being, as it is, despite of us knowing what happens, is still very much optimistic, because it ends in a powerful note. Did you have any doubts about how to end the film, or?
Yes, until I had the idea of making her dance, there was something that didn't work, because I wanted it to be an energetic message, because it was such a wonderful woman, such a wonderful revolutionary woman. And I wanted her message to be energetic in spite of the fact that she chose to take her life. So when I decided to make her dance, that was the solution. And of course, I always wanted to end the film with her as a young girl. That was also how I wanted to end it, because I wanted us to remember what was her dream at the beginning, because that's the most important thing, her dream, and how she fought for her dream. Then if she lost or she won is not as important as the fact that she fought. And I think that it's very true what Marx says when he says that life is to fight. And that's the most important thing. And the fight is more important than the results.
Did you have, regarding the portrayal of Engels in the film, what were your thoughts of how to portray him and his figure towards, and his relationship towards Eleanor?
Well, Engels is a beautiful figure, and in the letters too, he's a person who loved life and enjoyed it. He had an incredibly wonderful relationship with friendship with Marx. I really, the letters between them and their friendship is really interesting and charming. And he helped him always, and he helped his family afterwards. He was a rich man, but he didn't care. He gave all his money, and he was a very intelligent man. And yes, it's one of my favorite characters in the film. All the things he says are true. For example, the game they play at the end of the film, when he says that Chateau Margaux, 1848, and all those things, that's true. That's what he answered because that whole game is something that is in the papers, Eleanor Marx papers, the game they played, which was called Confession, and everybody said their own thing. And it's incredible how Engels is a person who enjoyed his life. I mean, you can tell he had a lightness. And it's interesting that his answers are always very similar to the young Eleanor's answers, because I think she had a particular charm to that way of living the life. And that's also, I think, what she found in Edward, who was a person who liked to enjoy his life too. And she found something in that lightness that her father didn't have, I believe. Something that charmed her, yeah.
And was this, when you just mentioned Edward again, was this part with the flowers, was this is this totally a real thing?
Yes, yes,
happened?
that's all true. That's all true.
Mhm.
Yes, that's all
Yeah.
true. Especially the fact that he put the flowers on the party's expenses. Yes, it's all true.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's I enjoyed in the film how these contradictions, you know, because at the same time she loves this man, and then she has to kind of like apologize
Yeah.
for the flowers
Just
that she
sit by
actually
him all
enjoyed.
the time.
Mm. So perhaps I will just tell to the audience that we still have some time. If they want to pose another question, we can still do that.
It's so strange not to see them, and I would love to be there and
Yes.
be in the cinema with everybody together.
Right now, it's only 10 people per
Yeah.
cinema here, so unfortunately, yes. But I was also wondering, because do you think that you choose Eleanor because she had this really strong relationship with her father, also because she was, you know, growing up while he was writing, you know, his most important works, and you know, in a sense, she grew up with the manifesto, you know.
With the capital. I think I chose Eleanor because she's the little one of the family, and I was the little one. And I have a brother and a sister who are much older, just like her. I mean, her sisters were 10 and 11 years older than her. There actually was a boy in the middle, but he died, and he died when she was 2 months old, so she never met him. And I have a brother who's 12 years older and a sister who's 8 years older. And somehow, you know, me too, I was the little one, and with aging parents, and the last one to leave the home. And I am very attached to my father, and I could connect very, very well on that. And it's somehow as if her childhood was never over. I think it's very touching the way she reacted when she learned that her father had had an illegitimate son, because it's not the reaction of a woman who's 40. It's the reaction of a child, you know, like you still think Papa is perfect. And you still think he loved mommy and all that. And I find that so, yeah, so touching.
Yes, and in a sense, it's also it's a double disappointment, I guess, in her eyes. It seems so in the film, because on the one side it's daddy disappointing her, on the other side it's daddy, the political figure, also you know, not taking care of a son, you know, that he could, you know, financially take care of him, and all of this. So yeah, I enjoyed those, and also I think that probably I mean, there's always a dialogue, as I saw it, between, you know, her relationship to her father and her relationship with her partner, you know, because she did kind of live in the shadow of her father. If we, I mean, of course she was her own person, but
you know, I don't think, you know, this thing about living in the shadow, whenever somebody tells me, I don't think she cared about that. I mean, she was a Marxist. It's like saying that every Marxist lived in the shadow of Marx. She was a Marxist. She believed in that. That was not really a problem about living in the shadow. She didn't have that kind of ambition, or she was a political leader. She worked in factories. She worked with workers and for the workers' rights on a very concrete level. I don't think she wanted any limelight, you know, anything about her. She wasn't. So I don't think that's very much the problem. Of course, the relationship with her father must have been complicated. Probably she idealized him. He overprotected her. But I think the problem was not that her father was Marx. I mean, her father was just like any other father.
So we have another question from the audience. What would Eleanor think about our current time, dealing with the pandemic, economic crisis bound to happen?
Well, you know, I was editing when the pandemic broke out, and we stopped working, and for a month I didn't see anything, and then we had to, after a couple of months, get back to work to finish the film, and I saw the film again, and it was such a strong thing that I was afraid that I would see the film and the film would be old, but then the scene in which she dances was so liberating when I saw it. And I really felt that dance was about us locked at home and not being able to do things. And it was also about wanting to help people. I think that this is something that happened with this pandemic. I mean, I think the contradictions of society came out in such an evident way, in such a painful way. The divisions, between those who have too much and those who don't have anything were so evident in this emergency, on all levels. And many people went out there and helped, and started, working for others and doing things to help. And that also was important because it somehow, many have just locked themselves in home and are even more afraid, but somehow those who a lot of us have received like a spank in the face of awareness of how many things were going wrong with our society and how many things we could do. And I think that Eleanor's story, Eleanor's message is still very valuable today, it talks to us, to this post-pandemic world, a lot. I think the past talks to us a lot in this post-pandemic world in general, and even the new biography I've been working on. It kind of helps us to put also things into perspective. We always seem to live in an eternal present. And I like the idea of putting things into perspective. So what I think that Eleanor Marx would say to answer the question is that I think Eleanor Marx would fight for the rights of those who are exploited and those who are paying for everybody else in this condition.
I think that's a really nice thing to say. I mean, I felt this as well. It felt really powerful at the end. And we have a couple more questions. Let's take Cohen's. The international theatrical releases.
Well, the question about the dog too. I like the sad dog at the end.
Okay, then let's start with the sad dog. So the question from Meta is, I like the sad dog on the floor at the end instead of the details about her suicide.
Yes, well, I didn't want to see the details about her suicide, of course. There would have been, and yes, I am very happy about that dog. He was very good, and the way he lifted his face, he was perfect. And Eleanor Marx had always had animals. She loved animals very much. She was a very empathic person, and I love animals, and I think it's a very interesting way to tell people's lives through their animals, their pets. I think it's also a way to look at them.
Then it's Cohen. The international theatrical releases have been seriously hindered by the pandemic, but the film was theatrically released in Italy. Italy had very revolutionary 70s. How do you think the film connects to the 70s generation, and how does it echo with the younger generation in Italy?
Well, in Italy, I was lucky because in Italy, we came out when the cinemas were open. It was September 17th, and the film stayed out, and it was still out in a lot of theaters when the cinemas closed at the end of October. So I was lucky, I have to admit. And the film went very well because it was all over the place and people were going back to cinemas, and it was beautiful to travel with the film and meet the audience, after what had happened. And like I think will be wonderful for those who have films in Italy coming out now, you know, the moment. And like it is, I am very proud that, you know, over there, you're going back to the movies and you're seeing my film. It's something that, for me, I was very proud in September because some cinemas reopened with my film. A lot of cinemas reopened with my film. So even if the audience is smaller because the number of people that can go in a theater is smaller, it is a huge success for me. The releases, the international releases, for example, Spain is going to come out in the summer. They weren't really hindered because, well, the film was sold in the months after Venice, and the Austria will come out. I think it will be. We have sold it in a lot of countries, and I think they will slowly come out now this summer with the cinemas that are open again.
We also have a question about this, actually. An anonymous guest is asking about the film was presented at the Venice Film Festival, and I suppose it went to cinemas around Europe, world afterwards. Did audiences view it differently in different places, and what was your experience with that?
Well, unfortunately, the only experience with another audience for me was in Vienna at the Biennale, because then all the festivals went online. So the audiences that I met were usually, you know, like this, which is different. You know, if you're in a theater and you see the faces of the people, which is something that I love to do, and you actually see the reactions, and well, it's different. Then you can tell. And if you're in the theater, I remember when I with Nico, when I traveled around the world with the film, there was a big difference in the way they laughed. For example, English, American audience or Scandinavian audience would laugh a lot, like it was a comic film, while in Italy, nobody would laugh. So it was very strange and interesting the way different audiences react. And I always thought, after that, I realized I have a Scandinavian sense of humor, probably. But so this is difficult for me to say. So yes, it's difficult, unfortunately. But I will have a clearer idea on how different audiences react in the world from now on. About the question that said that in Italy, the 70s generation was very, I think something clicked in Italy, and it was the reason why it was such a success. Also because Marx for us is the same thing happened with my first film, Cosmonaut, because of course communism was a big thing in my country. I mean, there was a huge communist movement. So while it's a little harder, I think, for example, in America, I mean, in America, in the United States, of course, Marx is not, you know, it's seen the way we see him in Europe. I mean, it's more complicated. But of course, in Italy, Marx is part of our history. I never felt this film as a film about an English family. This film is about a European family, and it regards us all.
So perhaps we can take the last question.
Yes.
And it is about your upcoming film. Is it a secret who the new biography is about?
Well, I'd like to wait before saying it because it's really too early, and I just finished the script. And but it is, I can say that it's set in medieval times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But no, I'm having a lot of fun with this one. Yeah, the thing I really want to say is that I have fun making. Yes, it's a woman. It's a woman. I have fun making these movies. I do a lot of research, and the research part is the most exciting one. And you know, and then you find the actress for the character you've been researching about. It's fascinating.
And at what point are you now with the film?
Well, the script is finished, and I'm going to shoot it this winter. Yes, in November, if everything goes the way, you know, you never know.
Yes, in these times. Well,
No, apart from this time in general, you never know with film financing. Yes. Then
yes.
in this time, you never know about anything. So. No, yes.
Well,
Let's hope
I
the
think we're
future will be better.
I think we're all looking forward to seeing the third biography, and I think we'll all be leaving this conversation with thinking a bit who might that be. And I would like to thank you so much for talking to us. And
Thank you all, and thank you to the people that are in the theater, and thank you to the people that are watch the film online, and they can't wait for us to all to go back to the cinemas. Go back to the cinemas, and it's going to be wonderful to be together again.
Yes, that's my wish for your film as well, to be shown in as many cinemas as possible. Yes. And also I wish you good luck with the new film, and I hope the conditions will be as perfect as possible.
Yes, yes.
Thank you once again, and thank you to the audience online and in the cinema hall for joining the conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night. Bye-bye.